Aloha and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Faith, Family, and Freedom, where Jim Hochberg and I are going to talk about the vaccination exemptions and what happens if your claim is denied. Let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Faith, Family, and Freedom. And Jim and I have been getting a lot of phone calls, not just on the last recording that we did. And we really thank you. There were over 2,000, I think 500 viewers on that particular video. So we know we hit an actual interest in the community. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what happens if you get denied by your employer, because Jim has gotten a few phone calls. And so we want to prepare you that it's not just a simple process. So what we're going to do first is I want to make a statement on behalf of Hawaii Family Forum that we are not making a position on whether people should be vaccinated or not. We're leaving that up to you. We are providing this video and the other videos that we've done simply as a tool for those who feel like they're being forced to do something that is against something that is deeply religious to them. It may be moral to them. It may be because of health reasons. For whatever your reason to not wanting to take the vaccination, that's between you, your family, and your doctor.
And that's the same for me.
Okay, so we want to make that clear that we're not taking a position on this. And we thank you for all of those that reached out saying, hey, I've been vaccinated. Great. We're not taking a position one way or another. So Jim, how I want to start this is I know that there's a couple of things happening across the nation right now. Today, Monday, FDA has approved the use of the Pfizer vaccination. But before we jump into that, I want you to start with the phone calls you've gotten from people who have actually lost their job. And I want you to address that so that people know that if they make this decision to fill out one of these forms and turn it in, that you need to be ready for a serious thing like this could potentially happen. So you want to address that?
So yeah, as we talked about in that other video that we got all those views and all that stuff, asking for the exemption on a religious basis has to be what the standard is: sincerely held religious belief. So if you ask for the exemption based on a sincerely held religious belief and it gets denied, so you go and get the vaccination, the question becomes, well, how sincerely held was that religious belief? And it's bad for the entire religious community if a large number of people asking for a religious exemption cave in and get the vaccination if it's denied. And people have called me, and it's interesting because the federal law requires that employers of a certain size, number of employees, have to give a reasonable accommodation to an employee who requests an exemption from some requirement at work based on their religious belief. And the reasonable accommodation obviously depends on what kind of company it is and what the job was that the requesting employee had. And I had some calls from people who got denied. So I got a call from a nurse who reviews and summarizes doctor charts, and she does it electronically from home. They denied her request for a religious exemption. Now, why? She has no personal contact with anybody related to her employment. So a reasonable accommodation could have easily been, well, you don't come into the office, you work from home electronically, so sure, you can have the exemption. Well, compare that to another person that called me and said, I'm the receptionist in our company that has about 70 employees, and they denied my exception. Well, the exemption request for the receptionist could result in an accommodation that you have to take a different position that doesn't put you in contact with everybody. Because if you're not going to get the vaccination and the employer thinks you should have it if you're going to be the receptionist, a reasonable accommodation, if you have the skills to do another job, would be to give you another assignment in a room by yourself or whatever, something that's not the central welcoming desk.
No, and I think it's interesting, Jim, because you made it very clear in the other interview that, just pulling this exemption off of the internet or getting it from a pastor or a friend or whatever. I mean, some of these exemptions, they may be good, they may be bad, but you made it clear several times in that video that each individual really has to look at their own individual circumstance. They need to know what it is that their employer is saying to them, and they also need to be able to articulate whatever their particular grievances against this forced mandate. And so,
which is a long way of saying they have to have a sincerely held religious belief that leads them not to get the vaccination. If they take the form that somebody else wrote and they don't even know what parts of it mean, or if the parts may or may not be factually correct, how sincere is that? And if they were to get questioned about what's on the form and they respond with, oh, well, actually, I took it off the internet, I don't really know. For instance, ADF put together a very comprehensive form that they sent to the lawyers so that while we are talking to individuals, if they have some of those objections, we have some language to use. And I sent it to a pastor and I said, there's some stuff in this about church history I don't even know. Is it true? So I couldn't fill that out myself and sign it as my sincerely held religious belief because I don't even know.
And I think it's important that people realize that even if they do agree with everything in the exemption form, and even if they're ready to say, yep, I understand this, I believe in this, that their employer could still deny them and they could lose their job. And whether
True.
they win at the end of the process, we want people to understand that you have to ask yourself that question. Am I so secure in my belief in this that I could potentially lose my job and be out of work while I fight through this? And then, Jim, you also need to help them understand the difference between needing an attorney and filing the grievance with the Equal Rights organization or the Civil Rights Commission, which we will get to.
Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk you through what the process is. But to answer your question, you and I have done community action network trainings for probably 10 or 15 years in churches all over the state, on all the islands. And typically what I ask the people in those meetings is, are you individually prepared for your faith to be crucified upside down? I've said that many, many times, right? And I've said that I am prepared to be crucified upside down for my faith. So losing your job is not getting crucified upside down. That's the point. If you're hedging your bets, trying to get an exemption, but you're going to get the shot anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about saying, no, I'm not going to get the shot. The most generally, what I've seen people generally say their religious objections have to do with the aborted baby research material in the science part of it. Other times they say, my body's the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that's all true too. But if the serum is derived from aborted baby body parts, and that religiously to you means you can't get the vaccination, that doesn't change if they deny your request for the exemption. So you have to be prepared to stand up for yourself, or don't bother.
And if you can't do it, I mean, if you're like, say, a single mom and you're doing this, and losing your job could create problems in your family, you just need to be aware of that. I mean,
well, and you may or may not be able to get unemployment insurance, but I will tell you, the extra unemployment that people are getting right now, $300 a week, $1,200 extra dollars a month over and above the regular unemployment that they qualified for. I know so many small business employers that can't find people. You walk around anywhere. I spent a lot of time in Waikiki recently because my sister and brother-in-law were visiting. Every place has a sign, help wanted, hiring bakers. I mean, it's incredible. So I think there's a lot of jobs to be had. The question is whether they would require the vaccine too. I don't know. But
Yeah,
there's a lot of people looking to hire.
yeah, and so we just want to make sure that you're fully aware that these are the things that can happen to you, so that you're prepared. You know, we're not trying to discourage you or encourage you. We're just trying to put the information out.
We're trying to educate. Correct.
Absolutely. And then again, a lot of you have asked me for that cheat sheet. And, you know, after talking with Jim, we were trying to put something together, Hawaii Family Forum was, but after talking to Jim, we just realized that we really can't do a cheat sheet because
It's too complicated.
It's too complicated. And so what we're trying to do by these interviews is just give you the information you need. And so I apologize. I thought I was going to be helpful, and then I ended up realizing, okay, we can't do that. So I apologize for that. So Jim, we just have a few minutes left in this first quarter, but I know you wanted to talk about the FDA ruling that they just came out with, right? So let's
talk about a few things really fast. First of all, requiring vaccine mandates is only in some places. It's not in other places. And that means that it's probably not 100% scientific. And then today the news said that the whole state of Montana, the legislature passed a law outlawing private companies from mandating vaccine for work, which means now some states are mandating, some states are prohibiting mandating. That tells me vaccine mandates are more political than scientific. Because if we're going to say the governors that mandate vaccines are doing it in goodwill, they're not doing it for political reasons, we have to equally say the governors that prohibit private companies from mandating vaccines are also doing it in goodwill. And so if it's either way in goodwill, it's obviously politics, number one. The second part of the politics is the FDA vaccine approval today for Pfizer. It got approval. It's no longer emergency use. So the question that I have, because of the politics of everything, is, oh, that's interesting. More people died from the vaccines for COVID than previous emergency use and trials, which led to the closing of those testing because of a very small number of deaths. How is it that they have approved it? And so what I'm going to do is ask my doctor to look at what the FDA came up with in their analysis. What are all the side effects on Pfizer, and what are the currently understood physiological reasons that you might not want to take it, like if you're allergic to something, if you have a heart fib, whatever those, because there's two things that go on during the experiment. One is to say, does it work? And the other is to say, is it safe? And so since it's now approved, they've decided that. So I want to know, what did they consider? What did they come up with? I'm going to talk to my doctor about my own physiology. What does all that mean for me? Just because it's approved doesn't mean it's still good. But the politics of the thing, when you read the article you've got up there, oh, it's approved now, everybody should go get it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think, again, what we're doing is we're trying to just give you the information so that you can make the best educated choice for yourself and your family.
It's got to be based on your own medical history.
Yes.
It can't be based on anybody else's medical history.
Yes, yes. And so I think it's really important. So this article that we're showing right now was in the Epic Times, but it does give the quote from Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, that basically said, quote, "The full approval of the Pfizer vaccine is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, there were some people who may have been waiting for this and who may come off the fence, so to speak, to get vaccinated. So it may help to increase vaccination rates to some extent. But I also think that there are universities and businesses that have been considering putting in vaccine requirements in order to create a safer workplace or learning environment. Again, because we're talking about vaccination mandates. With
But
approval means there's probably going to be more emphasis on that.
and the good Surgeon General is actually wrong, because getting the vaccine doesn't necessarily create a safer workplace or learning environment, because people with the vaccine are getting COVID anyway.
And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll kind of very briefly look at where Hawaii stands in all this vaccinations. And then we're going to walk you through the process of what do you do if your exemption is denied. So we'll be right. All right. Welcome back. What we're going to do is very briefly just show you the Hawaii numbers right now, according to the Hawaii Health Department of Health. And today's date is August 23rd. So I'm showing you on the screen the health.hawaii.gov website, so that you know if you want to go and look at these numbers for yourself, then we encourage you to do it, because a lot of people just listen to what they're hearing on the news. I would say that the numbers that have been reported have been pretty accurate according to what the Hawaii Health Department is saying. I'm not making a claim, because I know there's some of you watching this right now going, well, we don't agree with the numbers. Okay, that's fine. What I'm saying is that what's being reported in the news does match what the Hawaii State Department of Health is saying. So I'm just saying, if you want to go back and check the numbers. So the Hawaii case counts, the Delta variant is going up, 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 up. And because of that, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green has said that what he's anticipating is that there's going to be tougher Hawaii travel restrictions coming as the surge continues. President Biden today on Monday has said that he is going to strongly encourage that more and more of these vaccination mandates happen. So you're seeing more and more of this coming down, which is why we wanted to show you the numbers. The travel restrictions, Hawaii already has pretty strong travel restrictions, but people are now recommending that even people that are vaccinated get the COVID test, which brings us to the next portion that I want to show you, because Jim actually has a comment. So the CDC in July did this lab alert on some of the testing that they're doing. And Jim, I know you want to talk specifically about this.
Well, this relates to all the public policy decisions nationally and in our state and in the other states. What's been driving the public policy decision making is positive cases, hospitalizations, and deaths from COVID. We talked previously about how last year in February 2020, the CDC created a new rule for death certificates, different from the existing rule that's been in effect since 2003, and which is still in effect if COVID isn't part of a person's death, which was in February of last year. The CDC said the top line cause of death if COVID is present is COVID. Even if you were in the hospital hanging on by the last string and got COVID, you didn't die of whatever you were on the last string on, you died of COVID. So the death certificate thing is different. So then it's hospitalizations and positive test result counts. So the nose swab test is the PCR test. On July 21st, 2021, a lab alert from the CDC's Division of Laboratory Services, and you can look, it's on there, it's CDC public documents, officially not supposed to contain lies. On July 19th, the CDC told the laboratories that after December 31st, 2021, that means January 1 coming up, they're not going to be allowed to use that RT-PCR test for COVID testing, and they need to take the next 6 months to find a replacement that can, listen to this, actually differentiate between influenza and COVID-19. Okay, so they're canceling, and here's the really weird political part. The CDC isn't canceling the emergency use authorization for this RT-PCR test. Look at the language. After December 31, 2021, the CDC is going to withdraw its own request to the FDA for emergency use authorization of that test. So they're like going to, when you were a kid and you said something dumb, and then you just go erase, erase. That's what they're doing with the emergency use authorization they got from the FDA. They're withdrawing it. They're not canceling it, which is really interesting, because I think if they canceled it, it would bring into question the validity of all the positive test results they got under the test that they now say can't differentiate between the flu and COVID. So that means the public policy that's on that first page that you showed with the Hawaii numbers of positive test results, using this RT-PCR test, who knows how many of those were the flu, because we had no flu season, and how many of them were COVID. So again, the politics in this disease is mind-blowing to me. So I would like you to get this. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm a lawyer that can read English. I comprehend what this says to me to mean next year we're going to start counting positives that are not the flu. Right now, we've been counting positives since February of 2020. We don't even know which ones were COVIDs and which were flu, but they were all positive COVIDs because this test couldn't tell the difference.
So if you can't see the URL for this particular page, I'll try to link it. I'm still learning how to do the whole YouTube posting thing. So when I post this, I'm going to try really hard to do a couple of things. As Jim and I are talking about these things, I'll try to put these links on the bottom. So check those out. And the other thing I'm going to do is I want to link, and I never know how to do that, but I'm going to try and figure it out. I want to link to the interview I did with Sean Louise last week for Faith in Politics, because he is a co-counsel on the class action lawsuit. And we've been getting a lot of questions about that.
Well, not only that, but Sean is also an employment lawyer, which I've been telling the people that have been calling me. I'm really not an employment lawyer. That's not what I do. And Sean on the show with you said he is an employment lawyer. So he would be willing to talk to people about their employment law issues with COVID. And so we want to make sure on this video, people get that link, watch that thing, and call him if, when you're going through the process we're going to describe, you get to the point that you do need an employment lawyer, because you can do most of the first part without one.
And that's what's important, because a lot of people are immediately calling saying, I need an attorney. What Jim is going to show you in the next few minutes is this first portion. You don't need an attorney, and we're going to walk you through the process as best as we can. The Hawaii State Civil Rights Commission is a lot easier than the national federal
the EEOC.
The EEOC.
But I'm still seeing that lab alert on
yes,
my share.
I haven't. That's because Jim may have not changed it yet. So yes. So anyway, we're now going to go. So again, you don't need an attorney for this beginning. So you've turned in your vaccination exemption form. You get denied. The first thing, if you're a resident in the state of Hawaii, the first thing you want to do is you want to go to the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission.
Now, before you talk too much about that, I want to take a few minutes to explain the big picture. Okay.
So we have about 6 minutes or so for this portion. So let's focus then on the Hawaii civil rights, and we'll come back for the federal one.
Well, but what I mean is that maybe we're going to have to do the Civil Rights Commission and the EEOC together in the next section, because it's important that people will realize in the state of Hawaii, if you ask for a religious exemption and you don't get one, you're denied, you cannot sue. In Hawaii, you must go through the Department of Labor Civil Rights Commission discrimination process, which is not a court process. It's an administrative process. That's why you don't need a lawyer.
Well, I think
You're
just continue
complaining
to
to
talk about this.
the Civil Rights Commission. They investigate, they contact your employer and ask for them to give their side of the story. The Civil Rights Commission acts as the intermediary to try and help the two of you work out a reasonable accommodation in the employment context. That takes months, or they're probably going to get inundated. So it's probably going to take kind of a long time. If you get fired because they denied your religious exemption request, you might want to consider adding not just a complaint about religious discrimination, but a complaint about being retaliated against by your employer because you ask for the exemption, because that's a whole separate claim at the Civil Rights Commission. And when we look at the form, you can pick both. But what happens then is, if the Civil Rights Commission can't work out a resolution as a settlement, they have to come to a conclusion. Did you or did you not bring enough facts forward that they think you have a claim? And if they think you have a valid claim, they can do two things. They can put you on the administrative hearing track, where it's kind of like a trial. There's testimony and evidence, and the Civil Rights Commission commissioners are the jury judge, and they make a decision. Or in lieu of that, they can give you what's called a right to sue letter. Armed with the right to sue letter, you then can file a case in court. But you only have 30 days, I think, or it might be 90 days. Like I said, I'm not an employment lawyer. Once you get that right to sue letter, you need to have Sean lined up to do the case, because you have a certain number of weeks. And if you don't file within those weeks, your claim dies.
Yeah, Jim wants to make sure that you all understand, as you're watching this, that all we're doing in this video is providing information. He is not giving you legal advice. So you need to make sure that you understand the process so that you can be well armed and well equipped to move through.
There's another important deadline, which is for the Civil Rights Commission for the state of Hawaii, and also the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunities Commission in the federal government. You must file an actual complaint after the part we're talking about in the next segment is over. You must file that within 180 days of the last day that you were discriminated against. So you have to put on your calendar 6 months to the day from the day that you were denied and fired, because if the process is taking longer, you've got to get your actual complaint filed. All the prerequisite inquiry and the interview and all that kind of stuff is not the actual complaint. So, and the other interesting thing is, both the EEOC and the Civil Rights Commission, if you file with one of them, they're supposed to jointly file you in the other one. But I am not sure how often something falls through the crack. And the political consideration on where you make your complaint is who's in charge of that organization and what their political persuasion would be in favor of, neutrally, or opposed to religious exemptions from a COVID vaccine. And last year, you had a Republican president, so that the EEOC, the person in charge of the EEOC would have been appointed by a Republican president. You had a Democratic governor, so the Labor Department and the Civil Rights Commission would have been appointed by a Democrat governor. And it might have made a difference, so it would have been good to file both yourself to make sure you didn't lose one or the other. Today, I don't know that it makes a difference, because they're all on the same team, generally speaking. But you might want to do both yourself. That way you make sure you get both of them. Only one of the processes is going to be worked on, and they figure out between the two of them whether you're in the federal system or the state system.
Okay, so we have just about a minute left. So let's, before we jump into the next session, we'll be actually walking them through the process. Someone has turned in their exemption form, Jim. They're in the state of Hawaii. They figured out the hat they wear and all that. They are denied. What is the very first step they do?
Okay, so They need to go online to the EEOC website for filing a religious discrimination complaint. They need to go online to the Civil Rights Commission page, which you're showing, to file. It says here under forms, HCRC, Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, employment PCQ, pre-complaint questionnaire. That's fillable. You just click the link, you start typing. You have to do that early because it takes a certain amount of time, and you've got to go through that whole pre-filing process before you can file, and you've got to file within 180 days. And I'm telling you, as more and more people do this, the Civil Rights Commission and the EEOC are going to get backlogged.
Okay,
so you've got to keep that 180-day deadline on your radar.
All right, so we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to launch right into the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission Employment PCQ, and we'll just kind of walk you through that briefly. All right, we will be right back. Okay, welcome back. So here we are at the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission website. We're on the Forms tab, and we're going right into the Hawaii Civil Rights Employment PCQ, and this is what's going to come up. This is a fillable form. There is another one that the second choice is one you can just download that's a regular PDF, but this is an online fillable form. So Jim, you want to walk us through this briefly?
Okay, so this first section explains, I think, pretty well. Anybody pretty much can read it and understand. So it's the whole thing, I think, is 6 or 7 pages long or something like that. The first couple, if you want to just scroll down a little bit slowly, it basically tells you what the process is, how it works, what they're going to do. And you notice under Hawaii law, you may stop, Eva, go back. Okay, right there. Under Hawaii law, you may not file an action in state court alleging discrimination unless a complaint is first filed with the HCRC, Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, and we issue a notice of right to sue. You can request a right to sue letter at any time after filing the complaint. A right to sue letter allows you to file a discrimination complaint in state court without further Civil Rights Commission involvement. So they're very good at explaining what's on here. I mean, that's something you really want to keep in mind, because you've got that Hawaii Civil Rights Commission does not have jurisdiction over complaints filed after the expiration of the 180 days. So go ahead and scroll down some more. So now they're telling you these are the grounds of discrimination in employment, because if you ask your employer for the religious exemption from the COVID vaccine mandate and they turned you down, they discriminated against you based on your religious belief. And you can see that religion is on the left side. And one thing that's not on here that I think you should consider, and it's on the EEOC site, is retaliation for complaining about something. If you complain about a civil right at work and they fire you for it, that's a retaliation complaint. That's another grounds to make a claim for discrimination in employment. So here's the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission is here to help. You do not need a lawyer. They are in charge and they are a go-between you and your employer. And that you file a complaint, you do an intake, the complaint gets served, there's an investigation, they make a decision, there's a notification, excuse me. And then before you go to court, you get this right to sue. But go down some more, because that's 30,000 feet view. Here's the start, pre-complaint questionnaire. This is what you're going to fill out as soon as you're told you do not get the exemption. You don't have to wait to get fired. If they don't give you the religious exemption, you can file this. If you get fired too, now you add the retaliation claim. If you file your complaint here with the questionnaire, and after that you get fired, you can contact the Civil Rights Commission, say, I want to add retaliation. But you go down and you fill it in, who you are, where you live, all this stuff. Go ahead, who's your employer? You got to know who your employer is. Keep going down. Now, the number of employees at your workplace is the entire company. So if your company is on many islands, if they're on many areas of Oahu. You need to know, put the total number of employees. And the reason that's important is Title VII under the US government applies to companies with a certain number of employees, which I think is like 15 or 20. But if you don't know, because you have no idea how many other offices and stuff, you can leave it blank. You can say, I don't know. But go ahead down. So now they want to know, how were you discriminated against? And again, it's religion on the left. If you think any of these other things apply, they could, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about purely being denied the request for religious exemption on the vaccination because it was a request for religious exemption and you were denied. It's a religious discrimination claim. And check the act of discrimination. If you were fired, you were fired, laid off, refuse the exemption. Okay, the date that it happened would be, if you're complaining about no exemption, the day they told you no exemption. If you're complaining about firing, the day you got fired. Name and job title of the person that told you that. You're going to have to know this, so you're going to want to find out. What reason did they give you? You're going to have to put that in. Go ahead. How did you learn about the Civil Rights Commission? Put Eva's name, not mine. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Did you file a complaint with the EEOC? They want to know because they're supposed to jointly file back and forth. So if you did, say yes. If no, say no. You don't need an attorney. If you have one, you can tell them, but I'm telling you, save your money for after this process, because if you do end up suing, you're going to need your money for there. So go ahead and scroll down.
Well, you got to answer the question though. How, if people didn't know about this and they're filling this out on number 8, what do you recommend they put?
If they saw it because of this video, they should say faith, family, freedom video. You know, if that's how, if they already knew about the Civil Rights Commission because they were involved previously, they could put that. So now here's the good part. Provide a summary of the discrimination with the person. And so there's a couple of pages of this. You can add additional paper if you want. But what you want to do is say, I work at this place and I don't want to get the vaccination. And I ask my employer to give me a religious exemption because, and put whatever you put in the paperwork to get the exemption, write it in there, whatever your reason was. And remember, it needed to be sincerely held. So when you talk to the investigator, they are probably going to quiz you on how sincere your beliefs were. Maybe they won't, but I mean, it makes sense that they would, since that's the standard of the claim. And then when you get to the bottom, I declare under penalty of perjury, the foregoing is true and correct. So this is a legal document. So be careful.
And you know what, if you're going to go through this process, no matter how frustrated you are, and some of you are going to be frustrated, will you please try very hard to treat the Civil Rights Commission people with respect? They're doing their job by asking the questions that they need to ask. So, you know, do your very best to provide all the factual information to the best of your knowledge. But, you know, what we don't want is a bunch of people harassing them and saying that they got this information from the Faith, Family, and Freedom educational podcast, because we're not telling anybody to go and berate anybody and treat anybody poorly.
Actually, what we always say, and we've been doing this, I don't remember, when did we start these community action network things? But anyway, I think it's way more than 10 years. We always say, do it with aloha.
Yes. Yeah.
So go ahead down to the next page.
All right.
So they want to know who are the witnesses, because they want to corroborate your story. So when you have talked to people about what should I do, I don't want to get the vaccine, talk to your mom, talk to your wife, talk to your husband, your sister, your brother, your buddy. Remember that you were talking to people because it validates your story. Think in terms of, oh gosh, everybody knows that Justice Kavanaugh went through a Senate confirmation hearing and people were making allegations. And the question was, well, when you say this event occurred, who did you tell? Right? That's what this is. Who did you tell? How do you contact them? What's their address? Because they want to call those people and they want to verify what you told them. And it's perfectly valid. If you came to me as a client to do any of the cases that I do, I ask the same stuff because I want to validate what you told people. It supports your case. So before you do this process, take a little bit of time, find out who, if you're not sure, if you remember, call your mom, call your friend, say, did I tell you about this? Call your pastor, whatever it was, and get a long list. If you talk to a lot of people, this has been a huge topic of conversation. Everybody's been talking to a lot of people about it. Put them in and apologize to your friends and family and pastors and say, I'm sorry, you're probably going to get a call, but please tell them what you remember we talked about. Of course, your pastor could consider that it's a clergy privilege conversation, but other than that, pretty much. So go ahead and scroll down some more.
Okay, and just remember, again, as you're listing people here, as Jim mentioned, make sure that you do have the conversation with them, because it's not going to help you if the Civil Rights Commission reaches out to somebody and they go, no, I don't remember having that conversation with
or
them.
They don't know why they're getting called, so they're not going to talk. You got to talk to them.
Yeah. Okay, and that's it. There's no more.
So that gets filed online if you use the online one. And then you're going to get a call later from an investigator at the Civil Rights Commission. They're going to say, okay, we finally got to your email, your submission, and they're going to want to set up a meeting. Maybe it'll be on Zoom, I don't know, where they'll go through it with you. They'll ask you questions and all that kind of stuff. Probably ask you what each one of those witnesses should be knowing, because they want to know what to ask about. They're going to want to know about your religious exemption, how your employer treated you, all that stuff. So you're going to write it all down. You're going to send it in. Then you're going to talk about it. Then you're not going to hear from them for a while. And they're going to have sent your complaint to your employer, and they're going to have an opportunity to write in their response. And then I'm not sure the Civil Rights Commission shares that with you. They may or they may not. I'm not sure. But they will contact you again and at least talk with you about what the employer's position was. Now, I am guessing, speculating, the employers are going to say, like the Surgeon General did in that news article today, we are demanding the vaccination because we want a safe workplace. And when the Civil Rights Commission comes back to you with that, that's when you get to explain to them, or maybe you'll talk about it in the first phone call. Why is that you don't think you need the vaccination to be safe? That could be like the nurse I talked about, because I work from home. I never go to the office. I do everything electronically. The vaccine isn't going to make me more or less safe at work. Or it might be because you already had COVID and you survived. And when you get the blood test, you already have better antibodies than you get from the vaccine. Or you may not think the vaccine is as effective as getting COVID, and the survival rate and the downsides of both compare in a certain way to help you. But this is where you get to do the science. The exemption is your religious faith. The safe workplace is the science part. And I would urge you to be boning up on what the science is, because CNN and MSNBC only give one side. And there's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of sources on the internet where you can get the other side. Always, always, always being careful on the internet that you go to the original source that the person speaking or writing is talking about. Click on that link. If they say there was a peer-reviewed medical journal that said Moderna was giving people heart problems, you don't want to just believe the guy. You want to look at the study, and you want to have that study to give to the investigator at the Civil Rights Commission to say, I read this and this tells me I'm better off not getting the vaccine, or whatever, whatever it is. This is a serious business and you need to be serious about it.
Okay, well, we have about a minute left, and then we're going to jump into filling it out with the EEOC.
So in the last minute, this is not the complaint. There are months and months, but you've only got 180 days, 6 months, to file your complaint. So you've got to keep asking the Civil Rights Commission person, when do I file my complaint? I got X number of months left in my 6 months. Always follow up with them. Anyway, don't let that 180 days expire because they're too busy to get to it.
All right, we're going to take a very quick break, and then we're jumping right into the EEOC application form. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, based on what you just saw in just the Hawaii form, you can see why we were unable to do a cheat sheet for you. There are so many moving parts that we would have done a disservice if we tried to make it into an easy step-by-step, because it just would not have been possible. So now we're going to jump into the EEOC.gov, and Jim, you want to walk us through this in the last 14 or so minutes?
Sure. So you remember on the Civil Rights Commission form, it asks, did you also file with the EEOC? This is that process. It's a lot more cumbersome just to get started. And that's why I want to show it to you. I do hope people will do both, but at least do the Civil Rights Commission one. So anyway, so they actually, on the first page, go ahead and scroll slowly down, how to file a charge of discrimination. There are time limits. Again, it's 180 days. Now it's interesting, stop there. The 180 calendar day filing deadline is 300 days if a state or local agency enforces the state law. So that's interesting. When you file at the Civil Rights Commission at the Labor Department in the state of Hawaii within the 180 days, you get an extra 120 days for this one. But I would suggest you file them at the same time, because missing those deadlines is fatal. You miss the deadline, it's over. So you can do it online. There's a public portal. Go ahead. Skip the in-person, it's not worth it. So up here, if you go to the EEOC public portal, it'll ask you some questions. And here's the public portal. So that's a little bit small to see. See those questions down there?
Yeah.
Let me put my glasses on here. So what happens through the intake interview, all these things, you want to look at those. And if you have any of those questions, you can do that. But what you do, go back up, is filing with the EEOC. I think that's a link. You can click that, I think. Okay, so they're going to show the progress on the bar as you go through this. I went through halfway before I had to really submit. And I stopped because I'm not really making a claim. I was using my own company discriminating against me to get through these things. So you want to scroll back up just a little teeny bit. Okay. If you're claiming your employer discriminated against you, they may be able to help. They're going to ask you some questions. Your answers will not be saved unless you submit your complaint. That's where I stopped, because I didn't want them to think I really made a complaint against myself. Okay, so to get started, what kind of employer do you have? Most of you, I think, are going to be business or nonprofits. The reason for that is if you work for the government, Sean Louise has already filed a class action on your behalf, and you've already called him because you watched his interview and my prior show. Or if you're in the union, if you're a temp agency or the federal government, I'm not really addressing that, but you can take it from here on that, but I don't really know that much about it. So I would expect most of you are clicking business or nonprofit organization that I applied to work for or I worked for. You worked for them, you asked for an exemption, they said no. So then you hit next. So submitting an inquiry is not filing the charge. Remember, you have to make the whole complaint within the 180 days, and this is not that. And if you were to click on the time limits, you would see that discussion, but we don't have to for the sake of time if you don't want. So, okay, go ahead. So this you can read that and see that the actual charge filing is at the end of the initial process. So go ahead and go back.
Okay.
So we've clicked on business or nonprofit and then go down and click next. And then they've got a little tutorial for you, which you might want to watch. You can even watch it in Spanish if your Spanish is good. What a country, huh? And then they've got a bunch of other links if you know you're interesting. Will my employer be notified? Yeah, you bet, because you're making a complaint. So you can look at that stuff, click next. And then timeliness. And so this is telling you to the format of when you were discriminated against. It's in the numerical frame, and you put that in there. So you want to go ahead and put the August 16th, which is supposedly when people were getting the last day to get their exemptions. And then go ahead and click next. So now we're at 42%. So I was discriminated against because, scroll down. So I would click, go ahead, religion. Oh, wait, go back. Not the information. Click the circle.
Oh, gosh. All right, hold on. Okay, here we go.
Okay, and then scroll down. The retaliation. No, the other one. I complained to my employer about discrimination. Unclick that one. Okay, so that's giving you both. I got fired or treated badly, and if not fired, but I think that's really all they're going to do because I didn't get the exemption. Assuming both, then go ahead to next. And now they want to know how many employees, because I guess it's 20 or maybe it's 15. Anyway, so pick 20 or more, or 50, pick 20 or more and go to next. And now they're going to say you qualify because there's enough. Where did it happen? You got to pick Hawaii. And then next. So they give you a summary of your responses. You can look at them. You can edit them if you notice you made a mistake. And if you don't want to edit anything, click next. And so the type of employer is business, my date, 20 or more, religion and discrimination. It's saying that your situation appears to be covered. They'll recommend you schedule an interview. So go ahead down. This is where I stopped because I wasn't going to actually schedule an interview. So if you hit next, you're going to be in the system. You're going to have to open an account and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully this is helpful to people because the proverbial excrement is hitting the fan. I'm getting a lot of calls. People need to know they need to do this without a lawyer. The government agency is supposed to be your advocate. Now, how opposed philosophically are they going to be to the position you're taking? I don't know. Hopefully, at least they can be neutral. I hope they aren't going to be antagonistic because they think you should get the vaccine, but anticipate that's a possibility. Human beings are human beings.
Well,
like my pastor always says, if it wasn't for the people, church would be great.
Well, and I guess this goes back to what we've been saying all along in the prior video we did and the one we're doing now. The foundation starts from you really having a clear understanding of your own circumstance and being able to articulate it and to be able to have those conversations in a gracious manner and to be prepared that this is going to be a long process. So
and what my mom used to say, forewarned is forearmed. So hopefully we have armed you with the information you need to take care of this without a lawyer.
Okay, and we'll do more of these as we continue to go on. So Jim, what I want to do briefly in the next, just for a couple of minutes, is there were some comments made on the first video that I'd like to address, like you to address. So the first comment we got on the video was someone who said, please address the fact, and I think you kind of did address this today, please address the fact that PCR tests are emergency use and therefore can't be mandated and must be given full disclosure and given the choice to opt out. Haven't heard anyone mention this fact, but I think you did mention.
Well, the answer is, gee whiz, on July 19th, the CDC told the laboratories that they are withdrawing the request they made for the emergency use authorization of the RT-PCR test. So that answers the guy's question. It's insane.
Which then we had another comment along those same lines and saying, so when the FDA approves it, then what do we do?
Well, they're not. They're withdrawing the request.
Okay. And the question, can the employer ask to know specifics about your beliefs? Our company is requesting this, and then they will put it in front of the tribunal of sorts to decide if it's good enough. Since the test is emergency use, doesn't that also require consent?
So those are two completely different things. The emergency use non-voluntary question is not a religious exemption issue. So it's valid. It's just not part of the religious exemption request denial discrimination claim process. Number two, you have to have a sincerely held religious belief. That doesn't mean you have to belong to a church that agrees with you, but it means there has to be a foundation that you can articulate from your religious faith. And if there is some who was the guy? Samaritan's Purse. Who is that guy? Anyway, big evangelical leader told everybody you should get the vaccine months ago. His dad was
Graham?
a big evangelist. Anyway.
Are you talking about Graham?
Yeah. Just because he says you should get the vaccine doesn't mean your religious belief to the contrary is invalid. It's your sincerely held belief. The question is, can they inquire? Well, they have to be able to determine if it's sincerely held or not. That doesn't mean it has to be approved by anybody else.
Okay, well, we've only got a couple of minutes and a couple more comments, Jim. So if the Biden administration is successful in coercing the FDA to approve these vaccines in September, all this will be moot, but you've already addressed.
Well, I told you what I'm going to ask my doctor to do with whatever the background is for the decision making.
Okay. Now, this individual says, which is why the focus should be on fighting these emergency powers the governor is using to strip our constitutional rights. That fight will expose the facts that this virus is totally survivable if you catch by improving your overall health and treatments other than the vaccine, and it will expose the potential dangers of taking the new vaccine.
Well, that wasn't really a question.
No, that was a comment. Okay. All right. And then the last comment is this. I was born and raised here, moved away in 2003, moved back home in 2015. I knew it was a blue cesspool, even as a young adult, and I would have always supported our candidates, even though I didn't believe they were the best candidate, but they were the better candidate. But I have stepped up in a way that I never thought I had to. I hear you about changing our government, but that is not helpful right now. We need action now. Kurt Bavella, who's a senator here in the state, has come out supporting the vaccination efforts. So that leaves me feeling hopeless for the Republican Party. Now, before Jim answers, we want to make it clear that Hawaii Family Forum is a 501c3 organization. We do not endorse or support any particular candidate or political party. So Jim, comments on that?
Hopelessness is not a Christian value. Christian values are the opposite. So if you're feeling hopeless, if it was me, I would spend more time in prayer.
Okay.
That being said, from a more practical perspective, it is really hard to get people elected in this state because we didn't participate for so many decades. We are looking at we're standing at the bottom of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, and that's the hill we got to climb.
All
you
right.
know.
And we will talk more about that in a later episode. We have run out of time. The last comment I want to save for last because I have a special comment to this. And this was from one of our disability rights individuals who feels like, and this was his comment. So bottom line, high risk folks must sacrifice their lives. So confusing. And again, I make the position that Hawaii Family Forum is not advocating for people to not take the vaccination or to take the vaccination. We support your right to choose, which is why we've done this educational video. We thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jim. And we will see you next time. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.